Welcome YouTubers, this is Necro Arcanist Extra Part in association with Bandit 1569, coming from the freezing fucking midwinter of Australia to bring you the next chapter in Book 1 of the Necrosis Chronicles, Hell's Crusade. If you have not yet watched chapters 1 through 11, then do so now to avoid spoilers. Previously on Hell's Crusade. After emerging from the basement of Mountain Heights, the Necros find that the school has been destroyed, the soldiers have been burned at the stake, and Adele and Brian are missing. John, Raziel, Dante, and Saberfang track down Brian to the mysterious Young Women's Academy of Silent Hill, where Raziel surprisingly finds Adele's sister, and John rescues a little boy as well as Brian. Back home, Adele meets her demonic uncle for the first time after he heals her concussion with demon-forged phoenix daggers. And after it is let slip that Raziel and Adele are now dating, John receives a sudden phone call. This is Hell's Crusade, Chapter 12, A Grave Situation. On the other end of the line, there was a man speaking in a generic Asian accent. "John, is it you?" he asked. John was puzzled, but he seemed to recognize the voice. "Mikey, me old mate, how you doing? Shit's gone down faster than projectile diarrhea. I've been working as a hacker for someone you don't need to know about. I've broken into some government files and I've found that they're going to publicly execute everybody who is a non-Australian resident to try and purify the country." "Fucking hell, what for?" "Your activities lately, and yes, I've been watching. They've been covered up by a terrorism scandal. Now the public wants every non-Australian dead, and that includes the both of us." "Why us?" "Well, I'm of Asian descent myself, and you're..." "I'm Croatian, Mike." "Yeah, that's the word, some country that doesn't even exist anymore. My family was just attacked up in Devonport. I'm the only survivor, so I'm coming down to Queenie so we can work something out." Mikey hung up, and Jack was immediately on his computer looking for the files that were mentioned. "He's right," said Jack. "His family now was just stricken off the census. You're next." "They're not going to stop with you either, John. They'll kill the kids off as well." John grabbed his scythe and swung it around, nearly taking off Spearin's left wing. "They can bloody well try," said John as he looked to his left. Spearin seemed to have another unusual body part to him. "You know, the way you're crossing your arms," said John, "looks like you got 4 of them." "Yes and no," replied Spearin. "You know how bat wings are attached to their arms? I have similar, but they are not true arms. I still use them like arms though. They allow me to punch the enemy 6 times as hard." 6? Spearin held up his gigantic right arm and flicked his tail around. Raziel then stood up and crossed his arms. "So who is this Mikey?" he asked. "I've heard you talk about him before." "Well, Mike is an old friend of mine and Jack and one of Brian's brothers," said John. "He was an undercover agent in Korea during the Gemini Wars, but he tipped me off to a dictator's house when he found it on Google Maps. Coincidentally, he was tracking a UFO at the time. Dude saved my life soon after. He was going out fishing with a war buddy of his from China. I just blew up a lighthouse that was a secret missile silo, but I didn't get out in time and the damn thing blew me up. Next thing I know, I was waking up and bloody Korean soldiers had their guns aimed at me head, so I made a run for it, jumped off the cliff. Got caught in Mikey's fishing net. Went for Mikey's mate would have bloody killed me. Anyway, Mikey took me to Japan to meet his wife, and took him back down under when he went to visit his sister for the holidays. Now his life's at risk, and I owe him mine." Jack packed up his computer and began to call somebody on his phone. 91 Delta 2, this is Alpha J. Requesting personal air transport, Queenstown, Tasmania. "Copy that, Alpha J," came a female voice. "Bringing in air transport. Also, see you tonight. Looking forward to it." Jack hung up. "We'll reach Michael with my private jet, the Screaming Eagle." "Screaming Eagle?" asked Luke. "Yeah, the AC's kinda faulty. It makes a bloody horrid noise when the jet breaks Mach 1. Getting it free for world crews can't find the source of the screeching." The roar of a jet plane could suddenly be heard overhead. "That's our ride," said Jack. A ladder suddenly fell in front of the lounge room window and Jack opened it. He and John leapt out of the window and climbed onto the ladder. Jack then took out his phone and began pushing buttons. As the pair climbed up the ladder, the plane took off on its own accord. "God love the autopilot on this thing," said Jack. "I can RC this thing from my phone. I ordered it to track Mikey." Jack pushed another button and the ladder began to retract with John still on it. "I should just fly after you," said John. "Unlike the kids, I can maintain a high altitude. Just don't ask me to cross the ocean or friggin' touch the clouds," some shit like that. Jack ran into the cockpit of the plane and took over the manual controls. "I have a lock on," he said. "He's in Tulla now. According to Google Maps Street View, he's getting petrol." "Let's go down there," said John. Jack began steering the plane into a nosedive. "Forget Screaming Eagle," commented John. "You should call it the bloody Peregrine Falcon." As the buildings of Tulla were in view, Jack brought the plane up and switched controls. "I'm going to bring it to a hover," he said. "You look out for Mikey." "How are you going to bloody hover it?" "I am the jet thrusters down and it manoeuvres like a helicopter." "Nice." John looked around the windows until he spotted a large white trailer van. "Northwest-west," he said. "He's about to leave the servo." Jack turned the plane around and lowered a crane. He scooped the van up and started to carry it off. John then opened an emergency hatch in the floor of the jet and slid down the crane cables, landing on the roof of the van. He leaned over the edge and waved hello to a horrified man who was wearing a black shirt, green pants, and he had short black hair that covered most of his face, like Raziel's hair, only it did not cover his left eye. The man then rolled down the window. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he said. "I thought the bloody Grim Reaper was at the window then." "It is a good resemblance," replied John. "But to talk matters, Mikey, Jack's giving you an airlift." "Fine, at least drop me off outside the cemetery. I've got some business to take care of." "Right then, I'll let Jack know." John climbed back up the cable and informed Jack of Mikey's request. Jack set off and was near instantly outside the cemetery, carefully dropping Mikey's van outside the walls. Mikey got out and unloaded a shovel and a very large canvas sheet. "What's all this?" asked Jack. "You never got a job grave digging?" asked John. "Not really, I can't stand being around the dead. In this day and age, especially with the apocalyptic hype, one can't be too careful around corpses, lest they reanimate." John began twirling his scythe around. "Well, if any corpses want a snack, they can eat cold steel," he said. John then turned to the truck. "Judging from the fact you're digging a hole, Mike," he said, "I guess you got some bodies in the back." "Around 5 of them," replied Mikey. "Then we're gonna be here all day with that puny little shovel. You might want to run." John chose a spot just to the right of where Mikey had begun to dig a hole. Then he stabbed a hole into the ground with the shaft of his scythe. Then he shoved his hand into the hole, and a fierce explosion suddenly blinded Jack and Mikey. When the smoke cleared, there was no sign of John, the shovel, the canvas, or even the debris. The only thing left was a long and wide rectangular crater. John then suddenly floated down on his wings, holding his scythe and his shovel in one hand, and a canvas sheet held up with the corners together, imitating a sack full of dirt. "Bloody hell!" called Jack. "I take my shit very seriously," replied John. "It was just a controlled explosion. Shockwave didn't even affect the tombstones nearby." John landed on the ground and placed the shovel and canvas in front of him. "Let's get burying," he said. John aimed his scythe at a tall, thick tree in the distance, and the wood suddenly exploded into quality lumber that arranged into the shape of 5 coffins. John then aimed his scythe at a large rock, which also exploded, and many small fragments emerged from the dust and shot into the coffins, nailing the wood together. The rest of the stone emerged and rolled together to the opening of the mass grave, fusing together into a wide gravestone that spanned the length of the actual grave. Then, the coffins flew into the grave, lids open and waiting. The 3 men walked over to the van, which had 5 body bags in the back. John planted his scythe into the ground and took 1 bag under each of his arms. Jack then carried a bag out under his right arm, balancing another on his sword, and Mikey carried the last and smallest out with both arms. They gently laid the corpses in a line by the side of the grave opposite the gravestone, and John jumped into the open grave and held his arms out. "Alright, start passing them down, guys," he said. One at a time, Jack and Mikey gently lifted the body bags and passed them down to John, who carefully placed them into the coffins. "Shouldn't we take them out of the bags?" asked Jack. "It doesn't matter," said Mikey. "They're biodegradable." John then jumped out of the grave and pulled the canvas sheet over so that the edge was barely dangling into the grave. He then raised his left arm into the air, and the scythe, which was still at the van, magically catapulted across the area and into John's hand. The three men then used their respective tools, scythe, sword and shovel, to begin scraping the dirt off of the canvas and into the crater until it was full. John used whatever little dirt was left to make a small pile in the middle of the grave. Then he turned to a daffodil sprouting out of the ground nearby. Its petals were a sickly colour, as if the general miasma of the air was affecting it. John pulled it out of the ground with the roots intact and planted it into the pile. The three then stood in front of the grave and bowed their heads in near silence, as John began humming a song quietly. Jack and Mikey recognised it as the ever-famous Last Post. This went on for about 3 minutes, at which point John stopped humming and turned to Mikey. "You should mark the gravestone," he said. "You'd be wrong not to. I'll give you a hand." John passed Mikey his scythe, and then stood behind him with his right hand on the back of Mikey's head. "Right then, point the scythe at the gravestone, Mike. Think about what you want it to say. Thanks to my magic, when you finish thinking, the scythe's going to write the words for you." Mikey nodded and concentrated heavily, forcing his eyes as closed as possible. Suddenly, the scythe fired out a beam of energy that would have thrown Mikey back if it weren't for John holding his head. John then took the scythe back off of Mikey and knelt down to read the gravestone. It bore a eulogy that John read aloud. "Here lie an innocent family, cut down by an unrelenting tyrant who knows no meaning of the words honour, forgiveness, harmony, or mercy. These words are written by their only living survivor, who vows to live for eternity with the mission to one day avenge their meaningless deaths, at which point would his soul finally be at peace." John patted Mikey on the back and the three set off. Jack used his phone to send his plane away, and so the three men jumped into the van and drove home. Once there, Mikey parked the car in the garage and the three entered the house. "Quite a big place," said Mikey. "Looked a bit smaller on Google Earth." As the three men were walking into the kitchen, Jack saw Sabafang standing on the bench with his head in the freezer. "You hungry there, boy?" asked Jack. "Nah," replied Sabafang. "It's a hot day today." "You think that's bad?" said John. "Wait until he tries to shove himself into the fridge. It's pathetically funny." John ran into the lounge room and jumped over the back of his chair, landing on it with his legs crossed on the coffee table. "So you've got a talking dog," said Mikey. "Werewolf," replied John. "Watch out, we've also got a 9-foot fire demon running around here. He's alright, just don't piss him off." With wide eyes, Mikey looked at the lit fireplace to see Spearin inside of it, curled up like a cat. He was even making purring sounds as he snored. Dante waltzed into the room with his hair in a mess, and John called out to him. "That's Mikey back there, Dante. Mikey, Dante." Dante turned to greet Mikey. "What happened here?" asked Dante. "Anime cosplay gone wrong?" "I'd say that about you," replied Mikey. "Just so you know," said Dante, "seats are free for all apart from one exception, and that's to sit in my spot and I'll kick you in the Nads amendment." "Shut up," commented John. "You know that only affects me." John turned to Mikey. "Mind him, he's an arrogant little arsehole." "I see the resemblance," said Mikey. John gave Mikey a cruel look before he found a remote for the TV and turned it on. "So where are the others, Dante?" he asked. "I'd expect to see Raz walking around here at least. You're normally at the bar kissing up to every girl in a 10-metre radius." "Raz took Adele out for their first date," replied Dante. "Bob's finally caught some time off and he's gone to the bar, taking everyone else with him. Me? You can see why I'm still here. Problem is Adele's hidden a friggin' airbrush on me." "Actually," said Spearin as he crawled out of the fireplace, "I had it in the public bathroom. I've spent 10 years locked in that hell chamber. There were insects making a nest in my hair, eating away at my head. I scraped out the little buggers and ate them as a snack." You weren't wrong about him being 9 foot tall, commented Mikey. Problem is, said John, I built the house of 8 foot doors because my youngest son's about 7.5. So Spearin is the one ducking under the doorways now. I don't mind it, said Spearin as he twisted his body around. It helps me stretch my back muscles. At that moment, John's phone began to ring, and Brian's voice called from the other line. John, all sorts of shit's gone down here, he said. The soldiers are running rampant, and kids can't hold them off much longer to avoid being taken away. Don't worry, said John. I'll gather everyone and come down. John hung up. Mikey, you stay here. Since you appear to be so skilled with technology, be creative and find a way to help us. The rest is, follow me. Everybody except for Mikey ran outside and headed for the pub on foot. Once they got there though, the area was a total disaster zone. As Brian said, soldiers were running rampant, shooting at anybody who tried to stop them. Luke, who was the most visible in the distance, was playing his axe like an electric guitar and let loose a blast of electricity that caused the hearts of the nearby soldiers to explode within their chests. You've been thunderstruck, he cried. Dante suddenly leapt into the fray ahead of everyone else and started performing his blade dance on every soldier in sight, switching targets when the current one was cut up to the point of falling apart into mincemeat. A small truck with a machine gun turret came racing through, and Brian caused the nearby grass to grow into thick vines that entangled the truck, crushing it to a pulp with all the soldiers inside. Adele came running out from behind John and she tripped over, falling at his feet. John then helped her up. Where is Raziel? He asked. I don't know, replied Adele. I lost him somewhere. The soldier suddenly ran up and opened fire at Adele, but she held her hand out and yelled, Time Crush! Everything within eyesight nearly froze to a halt, having been slowed down to the point where it took a full minute for any soldier to fire a bullet. Adele took every bullet that was currently flying out of midair and repositioned them in front of her, facing a number of soldiers in the shape of a heart. She snapped her fingers and time went back to normal, and the bullets only shot forward, killing the soldiers. Nice job, commented Jack. How did you see that? Asked Adele. I live in the Matrix. I see everything. The group rushed forwards to join their comrades in battle, and Jack called out to one group of soldiers, Hasta la vista, the bags, as he swung his sword like a cricket bat, sending the heads of the soldiers flying. Odeon suddenly rode in from out of nowhere, cutting down soldiers left and right, and Elite attempted to fire a rocket at the horseman, but Stan leapt up into the air and slammed his head into the Elite's back before slashing him to ribbons. John noticed from across the field that at some point, Stan had wrapped barbed wire around a single blade on his left arm. Stan then took a mad dash, scraping his blades along the ground as he ran, causing sparks to ignite a leaking fuel trail caused by Luke's gun, catching a nearby troop transport vehicle on fire. A tank appeared on sight, but it suddenly shook as Vinci picked it up and tossed it across the field, where Spearin leapt up and set it on fire, turning it into a falling meteor that collided with another tank coming from the opposite direction. Vincent then spotted an Elite that was not paying attention to him, so he ran up to the Elite, purposefully dragging his gunblade into the ground. Then he swung upwards, launching the Elite into the air with his tremendous strength. Vincent leapt up and span around in a circle, giving the Elite 3 deep cuts along the abdomen. Then, as Vincent succumbed to gravity, he gave an overhead swing that slammed the Elite down into the ground. Vincent himself landed on the ground, and the force of physics caused the blade to sever the Elite in two, whilst cracking open a line in the road, facing Vincent's general direction. On the other side of the area, Adele was exhausted from battle. Trying to dodge the soldiers' gunfire left and right, she suddenly froze up and collapsed to the ground. The horseman Odeon saw this and ran amongst the soldiers, killing those that ventured near Adele while calling out for John to help. Suddenly, a gleaming ray of light descended from the clouds and shone over Adele. Seemingly unconscious, her body lifted up into the air. Odeon tried to grab at Adele to bring her back down, but the instant he touched her, the light emitted a large burst that threw him away, forcing him to turn back into Raziel. The beam began to glow pink, and Adele's eyes opened, seemingly aware in a trance-like state. She She held her arms out to embrace the light, then she drew her limbs in, causing the beam to shrink. In a flash, the beam suddenly spread outwards like a supernova, and Adele transformed. She seemed taller, more mature. 3 pairs of golden wings sprouted from her back. 1 pair emerged from either side of her forehead, and 2 pairs sprouted out of her ankles. Her hair became a flowing waterfall of golden hair, and her glaive transformed into an hourglass, which itself emitted a blade entirely of pink light, dancing like flame. Adele's dress faded to pure white, and she landed on the ground. Raziel ran over to her, but she said nothing. All that Adele did was give a smile. A soldier approached and tried to shoot at her, but she swung the light beam around, incinerating the bullets in mid-air. She then lifted the beam into the air, and as she spoke, her voice seemed to echo with an entire choir of angels singing. I am Hecate, the seraphic goddess. I now bring unto you the compression of space and time itself. She started to rise into the air, slowly rotating as she began to give a slow dance. Below her feet, a vortex opened up, slowly spreading out. Inside this field, stars and galaxies could be seen. In clouds, sparkling dust flowed like a river, seeming to be the sands of time itself. Raziel was not affected by this field, but any soldiers or their vehicles touched by the growing field of energy were absorbed by it, their physical forms distorting as they were crushed into a subatomic singularity. Hecate's movement slowed to a stop, including her rotating. Suddenly, she began to turn the other way, and the field retracted as she resumed dancing. She started to move faster and faster until she was nearly a blur. Suddenly, the vortex imploded, sending out a shockwave that turned every last shred of the enemy within range to collapse and turn to dust, as if the spell had aged them into oblivion. In a flash of light, Hecate disappeared, and Adele took her place. She fell to the ground, only to be caught by Raziel. Where am I? She asked as she opened her eyes. Safe, replied Raziel calmly. That was scary. You're telling me. Raziel let Adele go to allow her to stand up. I feel weak, she said. That normally happens, replied Raziel. You just summoned a scion. Just need to rest a minute. Adele walked over to a wall and leaned against it, looking down while clutching her upper left arm. Are you hurt? Asked as he approached Adele. No, I'm fine, replied Adele as she lowered her veil. My eyes hurt though. I think I caught dust in them or something. What happened out there? Asked John. Raziel said those things usually come out from an emotional trauma, or some shit like that. Adele looked up at John. I think I was just scared, she said. I was trying to get my bearings, but the noise of guns firing, the smoke from the explosions just became too much, and I passed out. I woke up and I saw this beautiful angel, an incredible voice. Adele's face began to light up. I was amazed. It was like I was staring into the face of God. She gave me a similar speech as to what Raziel had, and I asked her why she came to me, and to a further point why she looked like me. She said that she appeared because I was afraid, and I guess she was right. She said I felt guilty because I lost Raziel, and I was afraid in case it was hurt. She said that because my powers involved time, she represented what I would become when the fullest extent of my powers as Nephilim emerged, but that can't happen for thousands of years. 1,000 years? Asked the shocked Luke. Yes, I was confused at first too, but I concluded that Nephilim must have an extended lifespan, similar to Saberfang and the werewolf species. We can live for an eternity, but apparently Nephilim are known to be called to battle for the gods when we mature, so... And since we are preyed upon before that time, most of us don't actually live that long. Well, the girl's got a point, said Stan. At that moment, something massive fell from the sky and crashed into a fountain nearby. All that was left was a massive crater with all the debris fallen into the bottom. A giant mechanical hand rose up from the crater, clawing its way out. A giant robot, like a walking tank, stood out of the flying dust, standing taller than most of the buildings in sight. Tank cannons were mounted on its shoulders, and its semi-spherical head hid a blazing furnace that was only visible through slits in its mouth. "Hey!" called Vincent. "I like fountains." Sten stared up at the robot. "Look at that giant hunk," he said. "That's what she said," called out Dante. "Hunk of metal, dumbass." Raziel and Adele looked at each other and nodded, then transformed into Odeon and Hecate with a burst of black and pink coloured lights. Standing tall and proud, Odeon extended his hand to allow Hecate to climb up behind him on the horse's back. "Now, Sleipnir," called Odeon as he tugged on the horse's reins like a whip. Sleipnir dashed forward, and the two Scions slashed at the robot's right leg with their weapons. Running back in front, they were dismayed to see that all they did was scratch the paint. The robot fired a salve of rockets from its shoulder cannons, which homed in on the pair and knocked them out. The dust settled to reveal them back in their normal forms, unconscious. "Fucking hell," said John. The robot fired another salvo at the remaining Necros, who jumped out of the way only for the pub to explode. Everybody, especially Dante and Brian, were shocked. Vincent suddenly ran forward in front of the two and began yelling at the robot. "Metalhead! First you destroy my fountain, then you hurt Raziel and Adele, now you blow up Bar. 3 things I like you hurt." Vincent began to swing his sword around and assumed a karate-style pose, talking in a very deep voice. "I must break you." John simply scoffed. "Was that Arnold Schwarzenegger?" he asked. Luke shook his head. "No way, man, that was Sylvester Stallone." Brian, infuriated at the destruction of his bar, gave the order to attack. Everybody charged up against the Iron Colossus, but they had almost no effect. Even Vincent's apocalyptic punches could not dent the robot's big armour. Suddenly the robot spoke in a loud monotone voice. "Atlas target acquired. Preparing annihilation mode." Stan began laughing. "Now I know that was Darth Vader," he said. Vincent was getting angrier and angrier as he continued punching at the robot. "Smash, robot, smash!" he cried. John jumped back to avoid Vincent's blind rage. "Man, that dude's gonna blow!" he yelled. Vincent wound up and tackled the robot down to the ground, slashing at its head. Without Vincent knowing, the robot swept its arm and flicked him away like a bug, sending Vincent flying into the nearby river. Shortly after, a giant burst of water sprung up from the river like a worm and danced around the area, lunging into the air before diving into the ground a distance in a seemingly random direction, before bursting out of the ground somewhere else and moving somewhere else, confusing Atlas's lock-on systems. Eventually the worm of water emerged out in front of the ruins of the bar and assumed the form of a coiled snake. The water began to shrink down and took on the form of a serpentine dragon with fish fin-like wings, a crown of coral atop its head, and despite its predominantly blue body, it had a mass of multicoloured scales across it. A series of spines ran down its back from the head to the tail, and the snake hissed at Atlas, bearing massive fangs twice the length of Dante's sword, as well as smaller jagged fangs lining the jaws that resembled Vincent's spiky hair. "Bloody hell, that's a big snake," called Luke. "That's what she said," commented Dante. The serpent reared up as high as it could on the back of its tail, screeching and hissing the words, "I am Leviathan, destroyer of old. As I have done in ages past, I shall send forth the fateless tide of Atlantis." Atlas looked up at Leviathan, stating, "Larger target acquired, switching to antimatter cannons." The robot's chest opened up to reveal an even larger cannon inside, which looked a lot like the cannon in Jack's sword. It charged up a powerful burst of energy and shot out, heavily wounding Leviathan. The serpent looked down at Dante and flicked him into Atlas's cannon with its tail. Dante was about to yell out in anger. He took the opportunity to slash at anything inside that looked important. Spear end Spearin then pointed out a crucial flaw. "That thing cannot turn around easily," he said. "I say half of us run to the other side and take it on from behind." Dante began to call out from inside Atlas, but before he could state any proper words, John called out in return, "Dante, if you say that's what she said, one more blood time I'm gonna come up there and pop you like a zit." Suddenly an explosion occurred within Atlas's chest, and Dante was fired out like a stuntman at a circus, knocking himself out on impact to the road. Leviathan then coiled up and sprang back into the air, causing water to seep out from under Atlas, who did not notice as it packed away at its cannon. "Antimatter cannon malfunctioning," he said, preparing non-nuclear atomic weaponry. The cannons on Atlas's shoulders raised to about twice their original height, and the barrels widened to 3 times their original size. Leviathan let out a shriek, causing the water to erupt in an aquatic volcano that sent Atlas flying into the air. The water then gathered into a growing orb above Atlas, which fell towards the ground like a meteor, smashing Atlas into the ground. However, before Leviathan could finish his spell, Atlas fired powerful rockets from his shoulders that decimated the gigantic snake, dissolving him into a flood. Vincent washed down to the ground, also unconscious. "Okay," screamed John, "I've had fucking enough of this." John fired his apocalypse spell at Atlas, but it barely did anything. "Avalanche!" called Brian, as he followed up by causing a thick spear of stone to emerge from the ground and impale Atlas, which managed to put a massive dent inside its chest. "Frost wave!" yelled Saberfang. Giant icicles started to form in the sky, which rained down upon Atlas. Stan prepared to attack the head, but a rocket blast knocked him out. Spearin ran over to Dante and tried to heal him with Phoenix Tears, but was also taken out in the process. One more laser barrage annihilated the entire block, defeating everybody else apart from John and Jack. "Power systems failure, battery leaking," said Atlas, preparing final resort attack. "Readying Doomsday Ray." "I got your Doomsday right here," said Jack, who readied his own cannon. The two fired their own energy beams, but Jack instantly began struggling with the force of Atlas's attack. Suddenly, Jack's cannon exploded under the pressure, sending John flying with its beam, while Atlas's attack hit Jack full force. John hit the ground hard enough to crack the pavement, but he managed to force himself up and run over to Jack, who was missing both his legs and an arm. "Shit!" said John. "Jack, come on mate, you can make it!" "Jack! Jack, no!" Atlas's voice rang out again, and this time it sounded scrambled due to its power source draining away. "Target life signs critical. Opening core for extermination mode." Atlas's mouth began to open, revealing a giant red crystal wrapped in various electronic materials. "Fucking oath," said John. "You killed Jack, you motherfucking bastard!" A wide red beam shot out of Atlas's mouth, spanning the radius of the unconscious Necros, and it slowly began moving towards them. As the beam moved, the dirt and vegetation it was touched by shriveled up and died, unable to be restored within the rest of humanity's lifetime. John picked up his scythe and began to go insane with anger. "No, I won't let you fucking touch them, you fucker!" John let out a vicious scream as he charged towards Atlas, the sheer pitch cracking nearby windows in still standing buildings. John jumped up to avoid the moving beam of annihilation as it descended upon a baby rabbit who had just burrowed out of the ground. Its head promptly disintegrated. John began to punch and slash at Atlas's exposed core, firing every spell he knew to shatter it. Atlas suddenly exploded and the beam died down before anybody other than Jack had been killed. John was sent crashing to the ground in front of the crater, a large scrap of metal stuck in his leg. John went to stand back up, but he fell back down to the ground. The skin in his left arm suddenly began to act like boiling water was bubbling underneath. The blood vessels running down his arm bloated up and thickened, turning a deep blue with bruises wherever they caused the skin to bulge out. crippled physically and spiritually. John managed to grab hold of his scythe and crawl towards the first person he could see with his blurring vision by swinging his scythe into the ground with his right arm like a pickaxe and dragging himself forward. Then, John saw somebody stand in front of him, and he looked up to see an elite with a remote control in one hand and a shotgun in the other. At the sound of roaring fire, John blacked out. And that was chapter 12. Okay, so we've had such a hectic short chapter. Mikey, aka Bandit1569, has had to bury his family killed by the Empire. Adele and Vincent have called their scions for the first time, and Jack was killed by the robot Atlas. Now, for this chapter, I want to explain the new scions. Adele has pretty much summed up her explanation for Hecate, but I'll summarise. She resembles what Adele, being a Nephilim, will mature into 1,000 years in the future. That is, if she survives long enough. Hecate's name comes from the Greek goddess of witchcraft, and her design is similar to that of a seraph, an entity from the Bible that is said to have 6 wings, 2 from its head, 2 from its back, 2 instead of its feet. That's why Hecate has 6 wings sprouting from her back, as well as from her forehead and ankles. The fact that her wings are golden simply imply Adele's inner, kind-hearted nature and purity, and Hecate's special weapon of choice is based on the lightsaber of sci-fi fantasy fame. But I made a sort of divine fire and light to fit the theme of the Seraphim being pretty much second only to God, as they are the highest rank of angels. That's all for Adele, so moving on. Vincent's scion is the serpent Leviathan. His design is based off of Final Fantasy, as is the recurring theme of the series so far. Leviathan is a water-based summon creature in Final Fantasy, which makes him fitting for Vincent. The crown of coral on my version of the sea god is purely aesthetic. Another concept in Leviathan's design is that some of his scales are differently coloured. If you go back to the very second chapter, it is mentioned that John and his family are of Aboriginal descent. The scales on Leviathan go back to the Dreamtime legend of the Rainbow Serpent. I can't remember much of the legend, but I know that the Rainbow Serpent is responsible for making the mountains, hills and valleys of Australia in the dawn of time. That's pretty much the summary of Leviathan. Although I will say, I willingly made it ironic that Vincent, in his rage, called the sign out after Alice destroyed a fountain and knocked him into the river. Moving on to the big boss battle, when I came up with the idea of Atlas, I wanted it to be like Alexander from Final Fantasy. A mechanical summon associated with the holy element, but as you can see in my concept artwork, that didn't fully work out. The only similarity is that Alexander's mouth is some kind of metal grate that opens up to shoot holy lights at the enemy, and his body is covered in rocket launchers, which also shoot light beams. That's pretty much it, so it's time for the music credits. During the intro where Bandit1569 is introduced, a song plays called Grim Reaper Lullaby. This is a song I downloaded off a site called Newgrounds after hearing the song in a YouTube video. I should try and find this video and who actually uploaded the song to Newgrounds so that I can leave credits for that. During a scene where Mikey buries his family, True from Silent Hill 2 plays. When John receives calls stating that the pub is under attack, Disturbed's Land of Confusion plays. When Adele summons Hecate, Battle Angels by Sanctuary plays. This is to be Adele's official theme for obvious reasons. When Vincent summons Leviathan not long after that, High Fish by Rammstein plays. This is Vincent's official theme, and I'll explain why in a second. During the big finale where Jack tries to take down Leviathan but is killed and John takes revengeful victory, Krauser theme from Resident Evil 4 plays. Now, Vincent's theme High Fish is a bit technical, as I only just realised this a few weeks ago, but it has a lot of unrelated symbolism that I can actually connect to Vincent's character. Rammstein, a German industrial metal band, for those who don't know, wrote the song for their fans. The official lyric translation I found goes as follows. Verse 1, we hold together, we put up with each other, we stick together, no one will slow us down. We remain loyal to you, we stand by that, we follow the rules if we are allowed to rule. Chorus, and the shark, it has tears, and they run down its face, but the shark lives in the water, so no one sees the tears. Verse 2, we keep up the pace, we keep our word. If one isn't keeping up, we stop right away. We keep our eyes open, we hold each other by the arm. 6 hearts that burn, fire keeps you warm. After another chorus, verse 3, he goes, in the depths it is lonely, so many a tear flows. That is why the water in the seas is salty. They can think whatever they want about us, we keep each other harmless, we will never stop. Verse 4 consists of the first half of verse 3 with the line, and a shark, before and after it. Now Haifisch, which is German for shark, tells how the band is loyal to their fans and are there only for their fans. The fans are the shark, who were upset when rumours spread that Rammstein was breaking up. That's the summarised version of the meaning anyway. Now, the way I applied Haifisch to Vincent goes as follows. The first verse describes how Vincent always stands by his brothers and sister, no matter what. This continues on into verse 2. The 6 hearts that burn are John, Raziel, Dante, Vincent, Adele and Saberfang. And the fire that keeps them warm is the faith and trust they have in each other. Verse 3 and the chorus take a sadder turn. The first half of verse 3 mentions that in the depths it is lonely. The depths being Vincent's size and strength. It's just that the genetic mutations that give him his incredible Hulk-like form intimidate everyone around him. So, people steer clear of Vincent, and his low intelligence and incapability to talk properly can often cause ridicule. Or at least it's suggested. All Vincent wants is for people to accept him for who he is, but he feels like nobody does, not even his family. That's where the chorus comes in. He is emotionally depressed because he thinks he's alone, but he doesn't want anybody to know how he feels because he sees tears as a sign of weakness. But everybody close to him sees him as a pillar of strength that is unbreakable. However, despite the invincible outer shell, there are cracks in Vincent's core. At least the second half of verse 3 makes up for this fact, as Vincent will continue to keep going, as he knows his family needs him and he will stand by them. So as long as the family can stick together, he doesn't care about his loneliness and depression. This kind of symbolism is what makes Haifisch perfect for Vincent as a theme. As I said, I only just realised this, having wanted to look up the lyrics for some of my favourite Rammstein songs, because they're all in German. I realised the song's name meant shark, and I thought it would apply to Vincent because he uses water magic. So, imagine my surprise when I read through the lyrics and I began making all these connections, making it fit Vincent perfectly. It's not often that you see something fit so well, and there aren't actually many theme songs in the Crazy Chronicles that I chose for the characters, so in fact I'm pretty sure there's only one other song that fits its chosen character on the same level as Vincent and Haifisch. And sadly I can't say anything about it without spoiling any future chapters. In fact, I can't even give a next time segment because I can't say anything without spoiling anything. So I'm just going to leave it at that. If you've enjoyed Hell's Crusade so far, leave a like and subscribe to Bandit1569's channel. Also, if anybody uses Facebook, look for the Necrosis Chronicles like page I've set up to stay up to date for future chapters of Hell's Crusade, as well as history and lore between chapters. Also, spread the word to anybody who might be interested in this sort of storytelling. I've also recently been looking into getting a capture card, so hopefully sometime later this month, I plan on starting Let's Plays of Bandit1569. Which Let's Play would you like to see first? Leave a comment below if you have a suggestion. I'm Necro Arcanist XIII in association with Bandit1569. Signing off. Stay classy, YouTube.